Hi, I'm Tamara Bork, and I'd like to talk to you today about organizational culture. We are going to be walking through some of the key ideas of the readings from Module 4. And as well, I'd like to relate to some of my real life experiences in my teaching practice that have come about as reflections on the readings and this subject matter. So in the fourth module, we looked at organizational culture. We looked at what culture means to the definition of an organization and why we study organizational culture. Why is it important to the survival of a vital organization? As team members, leaders, teacher leaders, administrators, the characteristics of the informal parts of the organization can help with reflection to develop into considerations that greatly affect our day-to-day operations. So they can affect productivity, effectiveness, and if these things flow from the core values of the organization and can be communicated by and held up through things like leadership and developing a distinct culture, then it appears that the sustainability of any organization can rely heavily on the style of leadership and identifying these practices and these actions that we need in order to create culture that promote positive affiliation with an organization. And that's really what we want, positive affiliation with an organization. So when going through all the readings, I especially reflected on that of Spillane and Sherrill, Breaking Up Isn't Hard to Do, Exploring the Dissolution of Teachers and School Leaders' Work-Related Ties. It called to mind right away a real-life experience that I had in my teaching practice, and I'd like to explain to you what that was. I had attended actually last year a conference, an ACPI conference, an Association Canadienne des Professionnels en Immersion. And this conference takes place in a different location across Canada every year. And it calls all immersion educators, immersion teachers, immersion administrators to a conference where we are sharing professional development. So the conference was a compilation of workshops and opportunities to network. And my goal as a teacher leader was to bring some of this information back to my French Immersion Center. So I work in a school where Immersion Center is defined by the fact that all classes are immersion classes. And I am, by definition, a career French immersion teacher, so I've always taught in the immersion stream. So I wanted to bring this learning back to my staff, and I eventually did that. Three things that really worked about this conference that I'll later tie to my three key ideas. First of all, we were French immersion teachers from all over Canada, and number one, immediately as you arrive at the conference, there is a sense of building of community amongst French immersion teachers, regardless of our backgrounds, experience, level of expertise, what province we came from. So even some of the professionals that came from traditionally non-French speaking milieus in Canada, like PEI, Alberta, BC, were exposed to at the same level as those of us who came from Ottawa, which is a very French speaking milieu. So it was right away a sense of community established. Some of the practices that took place were just us getting up and singing French folk songs together, and in the meet and greets, sharing of experiences that we have in our classrooms. So the second thing was we together defined a distinct cultural characteristics and aspects of an immersion school, an immersion teacher, an immersion center across Canada. So we shared some of that. We co-constructed what is that definition? What do we want that definition to look like in the 21st century? And that was really cool. And then the next thing was that we shared some valuable knowledge, learning, and it was a place for really progressive discourse. So we got together and collaborated, no judgment, and of course different things came about, and it encouraged a pursuing of excellence and positive transformation. So we came away really changed. So after thinking about that positive experience and that transformational experience, and thinking about how organizational culture really helps start us on a pathway to change. I've identified 3 ideas that I think are key from the readings. So first, defining, building, and branding your school's culture is one of the most transformational and necessary tools that any leader or administrator can employ in order to bring about positive change. So if you don't have a defined culture, or if you haven't communicated what values, core beliefs, and cultural aspects define that school organization, and if you're not living that and it's not in action in the school, then change will be hard to come about. Kenneth Leeswood's leadership framework is invariably an instructional framework for leaders, and it provides leaders with a clear picture of what effective leadership looks like at the level of individual leader and at the level of organization. But it's up to the leader, I think, to connect that to culture and put into action what that needs to look like in every particular building. So I guess the marriage of what the values of that leader as an individual brings to the organization, as well as the values of those in the building. So it is co-constructed, and it's something that has to be up for discussion and productive discussion. But definitely, if the culture is defined and it's held up high, and if the leader, as part of their mission, ties back all collaboration, all learning, all progress to the culture and holds onto that firmly, then I think the organization can only stand to benefit from that. So number 2, and this is huge, relationship building and deepening affiliations within the teaching profession, school, and community is a way to bring a sense of belonging for teachers within the organizational structure. So let me just say, these relationships and connections boost student results, create the desire for effective teaching, right? To keep up with our peers, and contribute to our overall health and well-being as leaders, teachers, students, and community. Spillane and Sherrell's article, in the one entitled "Breaking Up Isn't Hard to Do," said exactly this. Empirical research demonstrates that teachers learn about teaching through their interactions with their colleagues. These interactions have been shown to translate into increased student achievement in both mathematics and language arts. They also pointed out, teachers with more effective peers are more effective themselves. Okay, so what they're highlighting is a sense of, or implies a sense of, paying it forward or keeping up with the Joneses. But in our profession, the survival of teachers, teacher leaders, and administrators, and the survival of the organization is really established through mentorship, leadership, associate teachers, professors, coaching, and these things are pertinent ways that the teaching profession self-preserves. It's a way that we create belonging and we take care of teachers. And other industries do it, military, police officers, the medical profession. The passing of the baton is necessary. In that article, they also pointed out that principals will often select teachers that they want to nurture or mentor into leadership positions within the school, because they see that as a way of sustaining the organization. In their absence, should anything happen, they would know that there were teachers there to step into their place to provide that leadership. So when we're looking at all of these things, we also have to look at the flip side of that. And we have to say that in organizations where connection and community and belonging has been put on a back burner, those teachers might be feeling lonely, disconnected, stressed, or exhausted. Hargreaves conducted a very interesting study on the generational progression of teacher engagement. The article was entitled, "Educational Change Takes Place: Life, Career, and Generational Factors in Teachers' Emotional Response to Educational Change." What they did was they talked about how teachers initially start out with very noble goals and intentions, only to be changed and affected and worn down by the stressful nature of the job. And Hargreaves also, in his research, calls attention to the fact that the middle or older generation sometimes can stand to suffer from disengagement. So it was suggested that tapping into the energy through the eyes of younger, more optimistic cohorts was an excellent way for teachers to continue to carry on their meaning and their mission from their generation, but to re-energize, reframe, and refocus in the present so that they can go forward, right? So I reflected at this particular reading because it's a tendency to feel nostalgic later on in your career about times gone by and how things were. But the reality is that teaching that's impactful for this generation and in this moment, that change is somewhere is somewhere in what's current and what's new. So things like mentorship and new teacher induction programs, coaching, looking for a way to recreate your purpose within the teaching organization is a wonderful way for teachers that might be suffering with some of that disengagement or fatigue or need for a renewal of spirit to find their identity again. There are many places for that in the teaching organization. So I think a good leader and a well-running organization will identify those people and offer them opportunities instead of overwhelming them with what at this point may seem like a challenge. So change, I think, can come about, but definitely in offering them the stimulation and the challenge that they need. So things like an associate teacher bringing in a student teacher into a classroom. This is a wonderful way for mid-career teacher to be exposed to so many new things in the industry and so many new things that are happening on the forefront in a very, very practical way, and to also feel that meaningful belonging and sense of passing the baton and paying it forward by giving into that new teacher in a way that makes us all such useful parts of the organization. So 3. Effective and progressive transformational school leadership administration can support and uphold a positive climate in a school. The effects of poor and toxic leadership can have an equally negative effect on teachers that might result in unnecessary stress, health, and burnout. So to end, Spillane and Sherrill's article conducted some research regarding the perception of school leadership held by teachers. They raised some interesting arguments. The poor perception of school leadership can affect a teacher's desire to stay or leave a school, or stay or invest time and expertise into a team. So the level of engagement can directly be attributed to the higher level of commitment that's experienced when we feel that we belong, when we identify with a culture, when we've helped to co-construct that culture, when we see those cultural values in action on a daily basis, when the positivity affects our experience in the climate and in the environment. So there are some practical things to note here. Teachers are depending on administrators to play an important role in shaping our opportunities, developing that social capital is what they referred to it as in the article, by assigning us to leadership opportunities, grade levels that bring out the best in us, grade teams that facilitate and support us, and offering us opportunities to shine on personal levels. Because of course, in a school building, so many people bring so many different talents and so many different experiences. And when we are able to shine in those ways, a feeling of confidence comes about, and that that environment all of a sudden becomes something that we're contributing to. So these 3 key ideas I wanted to recap. Number 1, culture has to be held high, has to be defined. The beliefs and values have to be very, very evident and in action, and to seem alive and impactful. Okay, and I think a lot of that comes through the leader continually pulling all relationships back to the culture and that definition of culture and a strong school culture. And it's probably the number 1 thing that will ensure the success of the organization. Number 2, relationships. relationships are priority. People are priority. Connection in the organization will ensure its sustainability, will ensure its health and its well-being. And connections will make the journey seem so much more pleasant and positive. So connection, I believe, starts with a leadership that we can connect to, and a leadership that holds belonging, or that sense of belonging, that sense of family very, very close to, dear to their hearts, and then can translate that in feeling to their employees. Number 3, climate and environment have everything to do with the sustainability of human resources and the sustainability of effective practice. So if we want best practice, then we have to look at our climate, we have to look at our environment, we have to look at some of the very, very key managerial things that leadership should be providing when overlooking an organization, that all of these components are taken, all the generational things, all the different experiential things are taken into consideration to best utilize and max out the impact that we can get from teachers. So I hope that this has been something that you could connect to. I did take a lot of time to reflect on the readings and how that connects to my teaching experience. And I do wish you positive interactions.